Let me start with why this is such an interesting time to have this discussion, and also why what the work you do is even more critically important, and why I think we need to have more imagination. Joseph Schumpeter in 1942 talked about creative destruction. And I think, well, let me define his definition of creative destruction was a process of industrial mutation that incessantly revolutionizes the structure from within, incessantly destroying the old one, incessantly creating a new one. Creative destruction. With everything that's happened this year, it feels to me that that's quite fitting to talk about it as creative destruction. And the two groups that are really smack in the middle of all of this right now is the auditor, the woman who needs to actually watch and tell us where the money went, COA Chair Grace Pulido-Tan, and the man who, well, he's sitting in, but he's got quite a role himself. Undersecretary Richard Moya Bon is on the technical end of DBM. He's joining us at the beginning, and will be joined then by Secretary Butch Abad, the Department of Budget Management. I guess let me throw this first question. One, do you agree it's a period of creative destruction? How are you guys doing your jobs now that's different from before the Napoles scandal began? You.
I think the period of destruction did not start this year. I think it started in the last election, when people came in and elected a president precisely because they wanted these things to happen. So I think we should give credit first to the voters who started the creative destruction process, of which, unfortunately, both of us are now in the middle of.
Fame and notoriety. And you, ma'am?
Well, I can only speak of COA, and I would say that on day one, when I assumed office, and that was April 18 of 2011, destruction started, and it's still going on to this day, and perhaps until I leave office in a year's time.
Well, your job is quite dangerous. I mean, we've seen dangerous in quotes, let me put it that way. It's difficult to go up against the system, and in many ways, that's what both of you have to do, and be part of the system and push for change within it. What are the difficulties? I guess to continue the question, what are the dangers and the opportunities that you see for you right now? Commissioner, Mrs.
In my case, for me, it's just in a day's work. It's all in a day's work. Whatever we do, whatever we get ourselves involved with, it's work. And for example, just to be concrete, because this question has been asked of me a lot of times, hindi ka ba natatakot? Aren't you afraid? You're up against very powerful people. Frankly, it never occurred to me that that I should be afraid. I did not hesitate for any moment about getting that report out and just letting the people know exactly what is in that report. What is very challenging and what is difficult really is all the time that it takes for me, for example, all that could be used for better things. Sitting in the Senate, for example, being asked to wait. We were originally scheduled at 2:30 in the afternoon, but it was not until past 9 in the evening that we were finally called. I mean, in the meantime, I could have, I wanted to work because there's so much that I need to do. But waiting there just keeps you suspended, and you cannot focus on whatever it is that you need to do, because at any time they could call you, And so finally I was there, so that was like a good 7 hours. So finally I was there, and then all the questions are asked, and a lot of those questions have been asked in a committee hearing, again by my favorite senator. So it was like a rehash. And at one point, I just wanted to say, can we just refer to the Senate records, because I'm sure there were records there. But you see, the one of the great virtues that I keep learning every day is temperance, because I am well, as you know, I say it as it is. I don't quiver. I mean, I don't quibble about little things, and I just say them as it is. But then I was in the Senate. I was before a senator, and I had to behave accordingly. So there are so many distractions that there's that for me that is the challenge, how to just go ahead and survive all the distractions. But in terms of being afraid for my safety or for my security, I mean, it's not really something I think about. What I am more concerned with is the safety and the security of our auditors. Because at least, I'm the head of agency. I have opportunities like this to defend myself in public. But our poor auditors, they're obscure.
And yet, I hope you don't mind, some of the auditors have themselves been charged in the second round, right?
Yeah.
So I guess this is the next question. I mean, when you try to change the status quo, there's going to be pushback.
Definitely.
And you should expect that pushback. In some of the criticism that's been thrown is that there's political partisanship, that the first report could have been better done. How do you respond to these things?
Well, that's one of the distractions I was saying. My favorite senator kept saying we were selective, there's partisan politics involved, but he himself, and I made sure to tell him that again during the last Senate hearing, but he himself, during his privileged speech, quoted so extensively from our audit report, things that I was not even talking about, but he saw for himself, he counted how many legislators were included in that report. And I think, if I remember right, he said something like 300 plus. I mean, and they are all there. So how can he say selective? And then he keeps hammering, why is it that we are being charged and so forth and so on? And I go, search me. I mean, it's the DOJ and the Ombudsman who takes care of the charging part. What we did was to make the audit and render the report. I mean, it's like, hello. So these are the challenges, but they as I said, I am learning a lot of temperance, and I think that it's part of the hazards of the job. Yeah.
Interesting. Undersecretary.
Let me just add, on
Please.
that day that Madam Grace Tan waited, it was her birthday. 7 hours. She was waiting 7 hours on her birthday. But there are opportunities, but I think the question is on reform opportunities. And reform by its nature are always disruptive.
Yeah, right.
And reform by its nature is always an opportunity. Correct. And almost always difficult. Because if it's not difficult, then it's not reform, it's just the normal way that we do things. So anyone who actually goes in government and expects reforms, that should be part of the burden that they should expect to come in. In fact, if they're not getting any resistance, they may not be doing a reasonably good job on the matter.
So you expect this kind of resistance.
Yes.
That's part. So let me ask you, I mean, in different shapes and forms, the Priority Development Assistance Fund has actually been in place since 1922. And in different shapes and forms, right? Perhaps with a break from when martial law was declared. But it came back in 1982 and it's been there since. I mean, is it fair to say this was institutionalized corruption that's evolved or shifted with each administration? That's one interpretation. The other interprets that this PDAF actually helps. It's like crowdsourcing from the bottom, right? Mm-hmm. But again, for me, for the Supreme Court to declare it unconstitutional now signals different things. That seems to be the common thing now, is that PDAF means corruption. PDAF means institutionalized corruption. Is that correct?
First, I think it is institutional. Whether it's institutional corruption or not, I think there's no absolute answer to that. I think you have to nuance that. I am fairly certain that we can go around the country and find people that genuinely benefited from PDAF. And we have several number of congressmen that genuinely use it for scholarship, genuinely use it for farm-to-market roads, genuinely use it for irrigation and those things. So I think there's that part. The question then is, at what point does it become more a patronage institution rather than I think the Supreme Court has acknowledged at this point that by and large, the non-benefits we're getting from this structure far outweighs the benefits that we're getting from the structure. Hence but it's not just the Supreme Court. This did not start with the Supreme Court. In fact, I think it's well worth to note that in this particular hearing, the Filipino won the case.
Yes.
Because this is what they want. Right. And this is why they voted the leaders that we have now, and this is why these leaders appointed the type of people that actually will make these aspirations happen. I think that's very important.
But to follow up on that, #Million People March, which happened on August 26, was really a spontaneous, emotional reaction, right? We can't say that we were all that rational, because when you ask people what they wanted after that, they didn't really know, right? So how do you then make this a constructive process rather than a destructive process?
Well, this is a good case in point. PDAF is gone. How constructive can it get? So the proof of the pudding is already present to us. So it encourages those who think that they can influence governance because it's true. Now they can. And this is the proof. Again, let's nuance it as well.
Please.
The same group of people sometimes would ask for certain things that really we could not afford. For example, everyone thinks that we should stop paying taxes. And there's a 1 million march to say we should stop paying taxes.
I would join.
Then there should be some nuancing as to when this we think collectively it will benefit us, and when collectively it's really just a highly partisan activity.
Do you think this can change politics, the way politics?
It has. It's past tense. It has changed politics.
And what are the changes?
Proof of that is that on the last election, people hated EPAL. EPAL is a social media phenomenon. And you know what the discussion is now? Anti-dynasty. Anti-dynasty is a crowdsourced pulse of the people. And I think anti-dynasty will be a significant contributor to the discussion in the 2016 election.
Interesting. The Aquino administration in particular, and please either one of you feel free on this one. When the Supreme Court struck down PDAF and they said it was unconstitutional, it was because it said that under the Aquino administration, it made it mandatory rather than recommendatory. I mean, and in some ways, this might be an unfair question to throw to you, but from talking with Secretary Abad and the thinking within DBM, what was the thinking to make that change? There was a shift when the Aquino administration took over that helped the Supreme Court strike it down.
I think the one that ultimately, it's a legal argument, and legal arguments go both ways. The proof of that is that the Supreme Court at one time said it's okay, now it doesn't.
Correct.
I guess. So I guess
different Supreme Courts also, right? Different makeups, different times, but yes.
Yes, and then the appreciation of the arguments I think has shifted. Sorry, the question is,
What did the Aquino administration want during the time it made those changes to the legal basis for PDAF?
Oh, well, I think one core issue there is transparency. I think the first one is that before, when you have PDAF, there is the soft and the hard component,
Correct.
both of which are not displayed properly.
Right.
When Secretary Abad came in, he says, it doesn't matter, a PDAF is a PDAF, let's bunch it together and then let's present those together. That is why we got pummeled in the media saying that PDAF rose during this administration. Right. That's actually not true. We actually accounted for it and displayed it more accurately than we did before. So that's the first one. So transparency, I think, played a bigger part. And in addition to that, Secretary Abad, consistent with the good governance and transparency, started to publish the releases of the SARO. You know, we've been publishing that for about 3 years now. The issue, long before this issue came in, those were published as well. So I think that helped. Also, that's the gene of this administration. If you notice, tuwid na daan. In fact, it's a requirement of the voters and part of the social contract. And this administration is merely responding to the social contract that it made.
So how do you deal with this now? It's such a fast-changing environment. There's a lot of information out there that can be mistaken, and people react emotionally. So one of the analysts we were speaking with said that it's partly too much transparency. Is there ever such a thing as too much transparency?
None.
So you agree?
There's
to be
never
fully
too much transparency. There's always lack of trust.
Okay.
And the only issue the core issue is not that there's not enough data that people do not trust. And the only way to improve trust is to actually earn it and deserve it by being more transparent.
What can civil society do now? You're on the tech end of this. What can technology enable? What can civil society do that actually will be constructive and help in moving the destruction away to something moving forward?
Well, first, sorry, there's some personal. Let me start with something. When
Please.
you spread something in the social media, and if you're going to spend your precious time spreading, let's not spread hate. Let us spread facts.
Yes.
And let us spread an opinion that actually makes tomorrow better than today. So that's
No
the first.
trolls.
No, yes. So if you notice in Yolanda, when the government did not respond as quickly as it should, or better yet, could not respond as quickly as it could, people started to hating.
Yes.
And then some sober-minded individuals, without a government coming in, started to ask the critical questions, and eventually people sobered down. So I think that's important. We have to remain sober in the face of all of this. We have to distinguish between showbiz news for entertainment and news for governance and help and rescue. That's really important. And that requires a certain degree of learning, I think. And in any technology, there's the first mover, the influencers, and then eventually people will follow. Clearly, the CSOs are first movers in this type. So it's probably your duty and your responsibility to sober things down so that we will have a sober discernment of all the issues. That's, I think, key. Also, participation is also necessary. You have to encourage the right people to participate. You cannot just let people with vested political interest who are getting paid to go to Facebook and tweet all these things. You cannot let them overwhelm the system. You have to get the genuine people, provide genuine feedback, because you can only pay so much. That's the beauty. And I'm sorry for all the media newsmen now. In the old days, there are very limited funnel of control points where you can actually influence financially.
Correct.
Now it's harder to do because now you have to influence more people. So it's actually better for these things. So the idea is to actually encourage them to contribute.
How bad is it? You talked about paid political agendas.
If you did big data crunching on moods, if you talk about exactly what the same people will say, you will realize that the sound bites cluster.
Yes.
Meaning that there's a deliberate effort to say the same things by a certain group.
And you can cluster them, actually.
And you
That's
can
kind of
cluster
interesting.
that, and which will give you a good indicator on whether this is being operated or not.
But we see it on both sides, both political sides.
Yes,
We see it on
absolutely.
both sides. So as civic society, as the CSOs go, right? It's funny, you tell them not to be emotional, but how can they get the message if it's not emotional?
Sorry. Not emotional, I think, is probably not correct, I guess. Especially for Filipinos. I think, how do you do a passionate discussion and yet be dispassionate?
Yeah, exactly. Good luck. No.
But we did. We did in Yolanda. The first day in Monday, everyone hates the government. Come Wednesday, everyone's saying, wait. This is a landlocked country. The only the only way to get here is through boats. Boats take 4 to 5 months, and there's no way to communicate what we needed. People started to sober down after some time.
But there were real world. So now we're talking about the virtual world. Let's go to the real world. In the real world, your job is very difficult. You have to actually not just police your own ranks, but also make sure that you put in place systems and processes. How do you do this when the system and process has just been declared unconstitutional?
It only gives us one less area to look into, meaning the PDAF. So there's really not much in there. May I just take this opportunity to put in context probably
Please.
the decision of the Supreme Court. There were 3 decisions of the Supreme Court earlier on the PDAF because the constitutionality of the pork barrel was was questioned on
Okay.
those occasions. And on those 3 occasions, the Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality and in fact even agreed that, or even said that, well, it's okay for the legislators to propose and identify projects. And then there was one particular case when the idea that but the PDAF is just being, is being corrupted. And the Supreme Court, being what it is, said, oh, but we cannot speculate and we do not decide on the basis of what could happen. They are always looking at real issues. So that provided the opening. Because this time, there is that PDAF report of the Commission on Audit that really documented the abuses.
Yes.
And not only the abuses, but also the big question mark, so where did all that money go? And providentially, the whistleblowers came to the surface and everything just melded.
Yes.
So that gave the Supreme Court another, the opportunity to take a really good look.
To jump.
And because of what they found out, and of course I feel very humbled that the Commission is very instrumental in this. I mean the audit report, and I dedicate this to our auditors who really labored hard. We're good. I mean, we're happy that the check and balance in government has been restored. Okay. Now, I would also like to say that when we were doing the PDAF audit, or maybe even when I was reviewing the report and validating all of those things with our auditors, I did conduct some kind of a revalida, knowing how sensitive the subject matter was.
Yes.
The people, and their stature in life being named there. So I had to be very, very careful. So I took it upon myself to personally review and validate the report. And let me say that at no point did we say, oh, we're going to do this because we're going to reform government. Oh, we're going to do this because we want COA to be famous and to be... No, as I said, it was all, and everything is all in a day's work. So I think that this decision has sent a very, very strong message to everyone. Number one, that if institutions really work and do their fair share of what is allocated to them in the Constitution, then things will work. If COA would do its job as it should, if the Supreme Court would do its job as it should, if the Ombudsman would do its, or the DOJ, then we're happy. Things would work, okay? That's one. Number two, it can be done. Because I think for the longest time, the Filipino was cynical. You asked Bon earlier, and I think he was a little hesitant to be more forthright about it. Is this patronage or corruption? Actually, for me, it's a no-brainer. It's been going on for so long. It's just that nobody would dare to bring it out officially and with sufficient documentary evidence, because it's such an aggravation. Perhaps if it were not my job, if I was not in the COA at this crucial point in time, I would not do it. I'd rather enjoy my family, my children, and rather than get myself into this thing. But it's been there for the longest time. A lot of people would ask, elections are very expensive, right?
Correct.
And everybody knows exactly how much kitty you should have if you're running for senator, for congressman, for mayor, everybody says so. But when they go to the COMELEC and submit their statement of expenses, it's nowhere near than what everybody is talking about in hushed silence, okay? Because really, as I said, that's why I think it's a no-brainer. You spend $200 million to run for a position. Well, where do you get that money to finance yourself? It's not like the U.S. where, you have these contributions, charity galas and all that. We don't have any system like that. It's like, how many friends do you have? So they. But then could anyone really put in 200 million every 3 years? You know? So where do you get it? And then after, and after that, when you get to the position, I'm sure that there must be a way by which to make those people who help you feel important. So I think it's just that people didn't want to talk about these things in the open.
So it's very interesting. So you're agreeing to a major degree, institutional corruption stems out of the pork barrel fund.
It's not only the pork barrel.
But the entire system.
Yeah, it's not. You know, the pork barrel is only about what? Less
1%.
than 10%. Less than how many percent, Bon, in the entire budget?
Less than 1%.
1%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's very small.
2.001 trillion.
You know, there are so many items in the budget where similar mechanisms, if I may say, take place.
And you're prepared to look into all of this.
We are looking.
You're
at all
looking
of
into
this,
all
yeah.
of this now.
Let me
Please.
add just 2 items. Since
Go
I'm
ahead.
speaking for SecAbad. SecAbad has always said that budgeting is really a political process. When you decide who gets what, that's always political in nature.
Correct.
So budgeting starts from election. Budgeting starts from electing the proper leaders. And it's not just the executive, as Chair Tana said. It
Right.
starts from electing the people who craft the budget, which is Congress,
Correct.
the president who executes the budget, and the oversight agencies and the institutions that actually ensure that those 2 groups will actually do the job properly. I forgot the second point, but maybe that will come out later. But just to remind, because this is the budget watch.
Yes,
And you
absolutely.
can never dissect budgeting from actually choosing the leaders that actually do the crafting.
Yeah.
I'm
You
throwing
cannot
one more
isolate.
question before you guys. Please, you can go up to the mics and ask questions, and we'll go into the open forum. I just want to follow up with this idea.
Oh, now I remember, sorry.
Go,
You know,
please.
thank you. I'm a bit dyslexic, so this will fly away if I don't say it. There are roughly about 7,000 auditors in COA, plus or minus. I don't know the exact amount, about 7,000. And there are about less than 100 million Filipinos. And about a third of that has broadband access. So about a third of, about 300,000. Is that correct? 300,000. If we make auditing everyone's business, we have 300,000 auditors.
Interesting.
Which is why we came up with the Citizen Participatory Audit.
Of which COA and civil society won an award in
Yes.
London.
Yes, we did.
Bright Spot, besting about 100 entries from about 60 countries.
It's only 1 year old, and already I think that we've made a lot of headway, and hopefully we will be able to institute it. That's precisely the idea.
So it's multiply the effect and how
Crowdsourcing
Multiplier
auditing.
effect, yes.
Crowdsource it.
Crowdsourcing auditors.
Okay, so the online bayanihan is also vigilance, online vigilance, and real world vigilance. Can I ask you before we go to the open forum about DAP, the
All right.
Disbursement Acceleration Program? We already have one way that
Zero?
that we know that the PDAF was declared unconstitutional. Are you prepared for DAP to go that same route? And if that's the case, what are you thinking? What are you planning?
First, let me qualify that the DAP is already with the Supreme Court. I think it's in the proper forum for us to determine whether it's
Correct.
constitutional or not. Having said that, let me just distinguish the two. PDAF is not DAP.
Yes.
PDAF is a fund that we execute. DAP is not a fund. If you go to GA, there is no DAP fund. It is a policy mechanism for us to allow us to tighten the execution of the budget. So I think just wanted to say that. And having said that, I think I think there's an argument next week, or this week or next week.
December 10.
Yes.
December 10,
Yes.
and hopefully a few more days after that, we can all now say someone is correct and someone is wrong. So, but the good part there is that this is part of this whole issue is really trust building, and the executive is doing its best to earn your trust. COA clearly is doing their best to earn everyone's trust. I think our courts are also doing their best to earn your trust, and there's no particular reason why we do not think they will have the wisdom to decide properly on the AP.
I guess I'm just asking, based on Supreme Court's, some of the justices' statements, Antonio Carpio for one, he gave certain specific ideas that seem to make the DAP unconstitutional. Savings, the definitions. Are you prepared to, if it's declared unconstitutional, how will you fund, how will you pump prime growth? Because that really was what DAP was pushed in. Or does that mean that this creative destruction process will mean that we're going to take 2 steps back because we won't be able to spend enough money?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Well, I guess on the matter of whether we will obey, we are,
Yes.
we took an oath to obey the laws of the land.
No,
so
I'm
whether
not-
they say constitution,
I
if
think
they
you
say
will
stop, we'll
obey.
stop.
Yeah,
Right.
but
So,
the question is, are you prepared? What are you preparing? What are the plans
Well,
in place?
If, for example, the Supreme Court says we can't do that, then it's simple. We go back to Congress for a supplemental budget. Hopefully, they will find it meritorious. Hopefully, they can deliberate well in the House. In fact, Secretary Abad is in the House of Representatives
Now,
specifically
supplemental
for
budget.
the supplemental budget that we want to do now. So that's the process.
Right.
Mid-year, we realize, well, the other mid-year, we realize we're not spending the way we should. We recraft the budget. We go back to Congress. Congress hopefully finds it meritorious. We execute. We lose a lot of time to do that. But I guess that's the mechanism. Also, I'd like to also craft that DAP is a response of a budget that is non-responsive. Part of the solution is to make the budget responsive from the onset. And it has always been the Secretary Abad's position that as we tighten the preparation of the budget, as we elucidate the priorities of the government in the budget properly, the need for DAP becomes less and less.
But the reality is that in 2011, we weren't able to spend enough money, and that's part of the reason the GDP was so low, right? We were at 3.7%, I think, in coming out off of a high of +7%.
Right.
And then it was DAP, it was the pump priming, being able to move the money through the system that allowed us to hit a 7%+ growth in the coming years. So do you expect, if this happens, and I'll ask you both this, if reforms take a toll on process, it's very hard to create processes on the go, right? So does this mean that we expect our growth rate to get pushed back, or are you prepared? How are you going to handle things like this? What structural reforms, I guess, are you going to put in place?
Okay, I think this administration will never allow the growth rate to be not just to slide, to be hostage to bureaucracy. I think it's important, and we have shown enough will to show that we can be creative in how we pump prime the economy. Part of the solution is in crafting better, more responsive budget. We're trying to do that. We have introduced performance-informed budgeting. Next year, we will tighten that further. It will be an outcome-based budgeting, which will allow a certain degree of flexibility, etc., etc. We have reduced most of the lump sum. Even before our congressmen asked those lump sum, we actually have disaggregated most of it, those lump sums already. I think there are many fiscal tools available to the executive that it will always evaluate at the point where it needs to. The prayer is that there will never be a need to do any more DAP because everyone has warmed up. Also, I think you have to, in 2011, I guess part of the reason was they had to stop and assess where things are, and that required a slowdown. It's exactly, when we evaluate someone, it's not on how they started, it's how they finished. And I think there's still 3 years, we're in a good position. I think we'll end up in a very good position. I think people would have forgiven that we actually slowed it down initially to get a good assessment. And I think people will forgive us that we have been reasonably creative in intervening in using the money to pump prime the economy. The president said it right. The issue is that whether this administration stole money or not. I think that's what people will judge us, not on the constitutionality.
Chair.
Yeah,
Tan.
I think so many things have really happened. But for me, the next step, I think, would be for election reforms to come in. Because at the end of the day, it's really whom the people put in office that runs this country. So now they've seen, as I said, we can do it. I mean, it can be done. I don't have to be here. Bon doesn't have to be here. We'll be out of here before you know it, guys. But
I hope so.
you know, yeah, we're just waiting. But the thing is, we should not wait until 2016 is the next election.
Yes,
ba?
ma'am.
Yes.
Okay, we should not wait until 2016 is in the corner, because even now, people who wants to get there are already preparing. Siguro dapat sabayan natin yan ng pagkamulat ng tao. Because it's really you and me, individually, who holds the key. We can only do so much in COA. I'm sure Bon can only do so much in DBM. But the real key, ang tao, so sana naman, pick upin na ng ating mga civil society na ngayon pa lang, ito na ang ating ihahatid sa mga tao. And let's start already that, yung critical mass, ngayon pa lang umpisahan na natin. Para pagdating ng kung sino man yung mga nagbabalak na sa tingin natin hindi ka tangi-tangi, baka naman we can stop them on their tracks na. Kasi sayang. There's been so much already. And it's not been easy. Bugbog katawan, we've been pummeled right and left. And then what? Parang sayang.
Let me add to that. You mentioned the median age is 22. Most of them is 23.
Yes.
That's the median age. And the people who will determine the next leadership are the young ones.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
that's precisely your constituent.
Yes.